Hi again, FCBC fam. My name is Jess. I am your host of For Creators by Creators. We are a place where we gather and connect and collaborate amongst creatives, amongst musicians, amongst artists, amongst business owners who have taken their brand online and leveraged these social tools and digital technologies to amplify, monetize, protect, and scale their brands. We want to dive into conversations that help you understand at home how to do that in an easy and a seamless way. So hopefully you don't have to go through the same challenges and tribulations, but we also want to highlight the conversations about when you are going to go through those challenges so that you might know how to spot the signs and work through that. Because as we know, the creator experience is mired with a variety of setbacks and challenges that are a natural part of knowing you're doing something worthwhile and you're helping the world through it. So today's conversation is going to be very important in that vein. We actually tried to have this conversation in September because it was Suicide Prevention Month, and that's going to be such a huge element of this episode. But we're here today now, and I'm excited to introduce our guest, Robin Kimery. Hi, Robin.
Hi.
How
Oh
you
my
doing?
gosh. Amazing. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I think it's such an incredible thing that you guys are doing here at For Creators by Creators, and I was excited to be a part of it.
Oh, we're excited to have you. Your story is so powerful and profound, and I'm sure there's quite a few people that will be able to relate to you. So let's just dig right in. And obviously, you are a hypnotherapist, and you are a content creator, and you've been able to leverage those two specialties to really make an impact on your community and to help people around you that might be going through some of the things you've already survived. Correct?
Correct. Yeah, that was the goal. That's where my mindset was going with all of it, and it's in process, it's in progress, and it just keeps growing and growing. So yeah, that's exactly it.
I love it. And so to start off, can you just take us back to the beginnings of your journey? Where did you find your niche, and how has bringing it online played into the growth of your business?
It's kind of an interesting story. Where did I find my niche? Okay, so I got to take it back. I started studying hypnosis in 2019.
Okay.
But what led me to studying that, I would say, is like probably the story of it all, right? So I guess growing up, I had my grandparents, my brother, just different people in my life. But my mom and dad, they both suffered from addiction, and so there was just all these things happening, like just right at the start, very early on. And so fast forward a little bit, growing up as a teenager, it was just challenging. Like I didn't have guidance in certain areas of life. And so I just felt really lost. Like the majority of my life, I felt very, very lost. But however, I found different ways of coping and numbing all those feelings of being lost. And so I spent the majority of my life doing that. And so with that being said, like I did always have a curiosity of the mind, like, looking at my family members who had suffered from addiction, like, why did they do what they do? It was just like, why? Why can't it be different? Why, all the questions that we have. And so fast forward a little bit, I tried to model some of the people in my family who were successful, right? And it was like me mirroring these things, but never having dealt with any of the issues. In fact, I didn't even know I had any of the issues that, became apparent later on. Fast forward, it was about 2019. I just realized in my life, like, I could always land the job. I could always land the relationship, but I could never keep it. Like I found myself in this relationship that was just not good for my mental health, not good for my well-being. I mean, even thinking back, like the person who I was with at the time, they were like, this is first, these friends are second, and you are absolutely last. And that's what I was like tolerating for myself. My self-esteem was low. My belief in myself was absolutely low. And we had went out to dinner one night, and we got in an argument. And we were staying at this place called Levels in downtown LA, and it kind of like everything came crashing down. I was broke. I had no money. I had no self-esteem. I am also a mom, so like my relationship and the effort I was putting forward was not very, very much. I was doing the bare minimum. And so I just found myself looking over a 20-story building, and I put my foot over. And everything in me was like, this is the right thing to do. This is the right thing to do. I was so low. And mind you, I was also drinking, at this time. So there's that factor to play into it. And luckily, the person saw me and was like, what are you doing? They saw from a window, came running. They're like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And it kind of woke
wait,
me up.
Somebody got you?
Somebody got me right in time. Because
I have full body chills. That's an angel in my mind. Like,
Yeah.
somebody got you?
Yeah, somebody got me.
Oh my gosh.
Somebody, the person who was there got me, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And it was the weirdest thing because right prior to that, there was just this voice of like, "Do it. Everything's gonna be okay." Like this very like, gosh, talk about evil, right? And so from that moment on, everything changed. Like all the vices, all the people, all the partying that I had tried to do to cover up whatever was hurting me, which I was absolutely unaware of, it just came to this moment where I was like sitting here, I was looking at what I had done that night, the argument. I was like, I'm becoming the monster that I've seen in my life, the one that I didn't like, the one that I saw in my childhood. Ugh, I'm going to cry. And so, and so it was like this really big moment. I called one of my friends and I realized I was like, there's something in my mind that has the ability to really harm me right now. Oh, yeah. And so like I called him, he picked me up, and luckily he's a very good friend. I'm going to call him out, Johnny Truelove. He's one of my best friends. He ended up being my business partner down the road.
Okay.
But he talked to me for like a couple hours, and I realized, okay, here I'm going to stop drinking. This drinking thing is just like, it was once the thing that helped me soothe, numb, and now it's not even doing its job. Like now it's actually leading me to really, really dangerous places. So yeah, I talked to him, and at this point I was like desperate because when I finally kind of like came to a place of stability, at least somewhat stability, like I really couldn't believe that that's where I ended up. I couldn't believe, like I was thinking of my daughter, I was thinking of all these, I would never leave her, to wonder that. And I was like, how did I get there? So that's kind of where my journey of like studying the mind and really trying to understand myself and the world around me began. So Johnny ended up giving me he gave me this meditation. It was like an inner being meditation. I had never meditated. And so I was like, but I was also desperate, right? Like at this point, I'm like, I felt so much guilt. I felt so much shame. I felt so much like hatred for myself, to be honest with you. Like, it was just so heavy that I was so desperate, even though I didn't know what this meditation thing was. I was like, okay, cool. He's like, I want you to do this for 21 days. And so I did. And I was listening to that. And he also showed me like Abraham Hicks, who she's also kind of like in that law of attraction world. And I had never been exposed to any of this. Okay. Like my awareness level was 0.
And this is like this is 5 years ago. This is not that long ago.
No, this is 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, and there's even more like, I mean, we'll get into that a bit later, but yeah, 5 years ago. So, yeah, like I started listening to this meditation, and within 10 days, I'm going to say the first days, like I was just like, I don't feel anything. Like I really don't feel anything. But I kept doing it because I made a promise to him that I would. Yeah. And he was checking in on me every day. So you guys, like if anybody's going through this, please make sure you have good friends who pour into your well-being, because I was so lucky to have this person, right? And a couple other people too. My grandma, I like told my grandma, surprisingly, like it was my grandma was like my person at the time. She's a big part of the trauma, but I also told her to keep me like kind of like just to stay connected. And so I did this meditation, and the first few days I didn't feel anything. My visualization wasn't there. Yeah. And on day 10, something happened. Like day 10, he talks about this part where you feel energy within your heart and you see this being. And I'm like, don't get it. And day 10, something hit. And it was like, I felt this feeling, this energy that I had been so disconnected from. Yeah. I saw a inner child, and he doesn't say that, which was kind of funny, because I'll come to that in a minute why it's funny. He doesn't say inner child, it's an inner being, but I saw a child. Yeah. And my child was like just curled up in a ball on the floor, and I was like, oh my God, like you're who I've been neglecting. Like I have learned from various things in my life, like to ignore you, to reject you. And all you needed was just somebody to love you. Like all these vices, all these things, all these people, all these Hollywood parties, like it was just me looking for love, right? All these bad choices, I was looking to feel better, but it was like this little one who I was like, oh my God, I have to love myself. Yeah. Like I need to love you. I need to reparent you. And so that's where the journey began. Like I realized through other people and just through hearing different meditations and different, like I threw myself into online world of personal development of like Abraham Hicks, Tony Robbins, Cole De Silva, just so many online creators
Yeah.
that give. They give so much, and I received so much from all this free content. Like it started off all free content, and my life completely changed. Right, like 2 months later, one of my girlfriends was like, "Hey, I remember how I told you that I could always get the job." Yeah, I could always get the job. I could always get the job. It was keeping the job. I got this job. It was at a opioids nonprofit, but I'll get to why that's kind of funny too, because it didn't work out. What happened was we were all producing real work. All of us were. And I remember thinking, like, how did I land this? This doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Right. But because of the family and because of addiction and stuff like that, I was really interested in kind of helping. How can I give back? Like, especially with what I just went through, it was like, oh my gosh, I have this chance to help. Like, I really want to help. And so with the opioids nonprofit, they were like, we want to build a rehab center. We want to do this, that, the other. And we want therapists. So I started researching therapists for them. But in my mind, I was like, you have to rewire where this person learned this coping mechanism. You cannot stick somebody in a rehab. I've done it before. I've been to rehab like twice. You can't put somebody somewhere and just think things are going to magically change because they had this moment of pause. I was like, there's something we're missing.
Yeah.
So I started looking at it, and everything started popping up. Hypnosis, rewiring the mind, rewiring your subconscious mind. Because your subconscious mind holds, your belief system. And so I just went down the rabbit hole of it. And then the algorithm plays with you too, right? So it was like, hypnosis,
It's feeding you more of what
feeding me more of exactly the thing. And so Marissa Peer popped up and her course, and I was like, you know what? I want to learn this. I had studied psychology and philosophy in college, and I remember being younger, and I wanted to be a therapist, and so that's kind of where my journey began, and it never stopped.
Oh.
Yeah, it never
I
stopped.
love it so much. Real quick, because I have so many questions based on what you just shared, but it's remarkable to me how similar parts of your journey are with what even I've experienced, and like the fact that I'll take 2 seconds to share that this time last year, I was at the lowest place I might have ever been in my life because I had avoided some really, to your point, whatever that inner being that was hurt and that was coping and that was numbing and that was hiding by work, by vices, by relationships, by false identities of who we are. It had there were things happening in my life where there was this spotlight shown on the fact these wounds aren't healed. And if you don't take the time to stop and focus on this only, you're not going to make it. And what's crazy is you mentioned there was a voice in your head telling you to jump, that you'll be okay. And I'll never forget, because I'm from an upbringing that suicide is not understood. And depression is not understood, and anxiety is not understood. And it's getting there. People are becoming more aware. They're becoming more educated. They're leaving more room for more findings and science behind it. But I didn't really have the tools to understand, even though I've lost dear people to this, even if it's just, their minds have been lost to this, right? Or their lives. And I remember being in my parents' I was visiting my parents for Christmas early in December, and I remember sitting in their spare bedroom. And arguably, this would be the place in the world I feel the most safe. I feel the most loved. I feel the most protected. I get to feel like a child and taken care of. And just a lot of those blocks we have would go down, right? And I remember the moment I closed my eyes to go to sleep, I heard a voice say, "End it." And I didn't really know what that meant, but I was trying to explain to my parents. I was like, suddenly I understood, because I will say I've never, thank God, battled with the true active ideation, right? I've never considered harming myself physically. Now, we've made choices that have harmed ourselves probably intentionally, subconsciously. We put ourselves in positions that are very painful, and a lot of the worst things that I've lived through in life have been the result of my not listening to that true inner being or not doing the healing. But as far as like an active act of this, I was never there, but I didn't know that suicidal ideation can be so subtle that it could be a thought that gets into your mind that you don't even align with. You don't even recognize it. You're like, where did that come from? I'm not schizophrenic. Like, what just happened? But I was trying to explain to my parents, the moment it enters, especially if you have a mind like mine that is predisposed towards rumination and OCD kind of, obsessiveness over these intrusive thoughts, suddenly it's like, okay, everything in my body is required right now to just shut that voice up. Because it's the only thing that I can hear. And it made me have such an increased capacity of empathy for people that battle that every single day. Like half of the time, the people that we lose after they've been fighting so long against that voice. And a lot of the people we still have are fighting that voice every single second of the day. And I think it's so important that we let people know, if you ever have those thoughts, those are not you. Your inner self would never harm yourself that way. The world needs you. It is a better place with you in it, I promise. And all pain eventually moves into a different season at some point. And the only other thing I want to mention, just to relate to what you just shared, is that you mentioned visualizing that inner self, right? And having time alone in the process of healing, where you were just kind of meditating and doing that inner work, right? And that's been the journey for me, that like those first few months after I had that night, I dedicated all of my time and energy solely towards that inner reflection, and without knowing that that was something that we need to look for, like what is your truest, safest, purest, most loving, the best version of yourself, that inner being. What does that look like? And what does that version of you need? I actually had, to your point, kind of a breakthrough where suddenly I was sitting outside in the sunshine in like a backyard, just kind of like I had music in my ears that was really like optimistic and hyping me up, and I just felt my body like wanting to dance. But I had this moment of it wasn't even intentional, where I was looking at the mountain in Utah, right? Like it's just so scenic out there, and that's all I could see. And there was this white picket fence right in front of me, and in that moment, just so naturally, I saw a version of me on the like white picket fence, literally standing on it. And I was just dancing. I was just sending it. I was just like so fully in the moment of being alive and glorifying in the fact that this world can be so beautiful. And there's so much joy that we can source if we can get to whatever that inner part of us is. So I want to thank you for sharing, obviously, a very vulnerable story with us, and for providing the insight into what this can look like. And I maybe, if we can, if you're comfortable, if you want to give any advice to somebody in the audience that might be battling this, let's say they get to the point with their foot off of the wall and there's not someone there. How would you suggest, and we might get to that with the longer story about your work, but how would you suggest in that moment that they can catch that moment and step back?
So I hope to hear this. It's a very good point. What do you do if nobody's there? I would ask you that you understand you are not your thoughts. Okay, you are not your thoughts. That thought, that voice, it's not the totality of you. It's just a thought. And you cannot control the thoughts that come in and out of your mind, but you can control the way you choose to perceive them. You could say, wait a minute, that's just a passing thought. It has no validity. I don't have to listen to it. And just understand tomorrow's a different day. Feelings change. Feelings absolutely change. So give yourself another day. Make the agreement, you know what? I'm going to give myself tomorrow. My therapist, actually, I remember talking to him because I had these random thoughts, and I've heard this from, I'll mention Dom, my mentor, but also my therapist. Dom mentioned, he's like, I think everybody has a passing thought at some point in their life of, a dark thought. And it was the first time I heard somebody say that out loud. And I was like, thank you for saying that. So can we acknowledge that for a lot of people, maybe not every single person, but just a thought passing by is normal. And my therapist said this. He was like, I remember one day the thoughts were coming by. I wasn't feeling anything. It was just like, hey, I need to tell you this. I'm having thoughts that are like passing by. They mean nothing to me right now, luckily. But what do I do? And he was like, well, have you considered all options A through Z? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, have you really done everything? Like, that's option Z. That's your last option. He's like, obviously, that is something that can be done. And he's like, I can't say it can't be done. It's one of the things, the reality of life, that we see people do it. He's like, but have you ever exercised like options A through Y before getting there? And I was like, he's like, have you sold all your stuff and like moved to Bali? And I was like, no. He's like, have you went and taken a yoga class? I was like, no. It's just so many things that I haven't done. He's like, have you went to the park and walked? Not yet. Or, so many things. And it put into perspective, do all the things, because there's an endless list. You'll never get through them. Do all the things before that option. That's not an option.
No.
Just make the agreement with yourself. That's not an option, because there's so many other options before that. And your day will shift. Like, those feelings will lift. Feelings move. So if you're in that moment, just let go of that being who you are, your identity, or even a choice that you have to make. Just get to tomorrow.
Oh, that's so gorgeous. And I also want to articulate that to your point, even in researching this myself in the last year, we have seen statistically, scientifically, the intrusive thoughts, the passing thoughts, every single human alive has some version of self-destructive thoughts, especially women. The amount of active ideation that's happening that might not at all be dark, but that is just happening at all times. We have so many thoughts a day. You know what I mean? And they're not, and they usually are so layered, especially if we're a parent, especially if we, have clients or patients or people that are hurting. Like there are so many. It can be very heavy. But so first, no, absolutely, you're not alone, and it's not that special that you're feeling that. Like I don't want people to think that they are unwell or that they are not okay or that they are broken because they're having those thoughts.
Or
those
that
thoughts,
something's wrong with them.
that something's wrong with them.
Yeah.
It means that you just have to kind of be ready to stand up to your point, like separate yourself from your thoughts. And just, I've heard it said, you can look at a thought and say, no, I don't like you. I'm going to get rid of you and I'm going to move on. And I loved what you had said about the fact that a part of your journey was going online and finding content creators who have made valuable, actionable, interesting content, made it available for free, used their platforms to do that, and that played a part in saving your life.
Huge part.
That's part of the goal here, is to have conversations that can make a difference in people's lives. And I can echo the same thing. I found one podcast earlier this year that changed everything for me. And there's ways that the ways we use our platforms, the ways we use our voice, and the ways we use our pain that we've survived through grit and tears and blood and sacrifice, the ways that we use that can truly change people's lives, can save lives. And so I also encourage anybody watching to never stop creating things that are good and that are rooted in hope or in optimization or in things that somebody can leverage to escape those darkest moments, because you may not ever see what you're doing, but I guarantee you someone in your audience is different because you're doing this.
Absolutely. I think there's so many creators I can look back on, and I love that you said that. There's so many creators I can look back on, and I'm like, I'm so grateful you put that piece of content out there. And here's the thing, I think there's so much, probably science and research studying, like whatever you put into your mind, it really affects your feeling state of being too. So I noticed too, I had to stop and question, like, what have I been putting in my mind?
Yes.
And a lot of it was depressing music,
Oh
right?
my
That
gosh.
we relate to, because it's like, oh my gosh, me too. And some of that's beautiful, but I really had to take back my control for this moment. Like, yes, I love that music, but for right now, I'm going to try something different. So maybe try something different. Try and put the positive content in for a while. And what I'll say is, initially I remember like with the meditation, I remember just one eye open, I'm like, I don't feel anything. And it takes a little time. Give yourself time to change, because this didn't happen overnight.
No.
You didn't get here overnight.
No.
So give yourself a moment, give yourself some grace, give yourself time to practice something new, practice a new feeling. You can change very quickly, but also give yourself the grace that it's okay if it takes a little bit too.
Yeah. Absolutely. I had a follow-up question that just left my head, so hopefully it comes back. But I also want to dig back into your specific journey and your specific content, because it feels like you've used your platform to educate people about both your work, your art form, and also your experience. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like after you went through this whole journey to get to the place you are today with your content, and how you're seeing that impact both your clients and people in your audience?
Yeah. So, I'll say this. I spent that year sober. I spent that year diving into studying. I just dove into it. And the content I was putting out at the time was just me and my daughter making like silly TikToks and just for fun. And that's kind of where we started. She was, it was the pandemic. And so she was like, we were doing it for entertainment, just for fun. So it actually started nothing to do with hypnosis, but there was like little practice for fun here and there, and people loved that. Like I got a lot of good feedback from that, which are like, this is so funny, and I was like, okay, cool. So there was a little bit of practicing and just like throwing myself into it, and there was a lot of saved drafts. Okay, like, do you guys know?
Oh
like,
yeah,
draft,
your phone,
draft.
100%.
So sometimes it's just for you. Okay, sometimes it's just fun. Sometimes it's just practice. But as I began to study hypnosis more, like doors and opportunities were opening. I was reaching out to people too. I reached out to one of my mentors and I was like, hi. And I didn't realize he started like at just a year previously, but I was like, hi, I'm Robin. I'm studying hypnosis. And we began like a friendship. So reach out to people. People
Yeah.
are like usually happy to connect with you. Okay. Dive into things that are good for you, that are going to be going towards your growth. The more I learned about my skill set, the more I had to talk about it. So that would start in conversations with people. It would just start in conversations.
Yes.
You know? And before you knew it, like I was getting ideas of like, oh, this would be a funny piece, or like this would be cool, or this may be some good information for somebody. So I spent that year sober just because it gave me a lot of clarity of my mind. My dad said this. He was like, obviously addiction was a huge part of my story too. My dad was like, hey, Robin, what if you like spent a year without it? And I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, you can always go back to it. If nothing changes, you can go back to it. And I was like, okay, I'll agree to a year. So in that year, like everything that happened, it was like I wasn't quite fully in hypnosis. I was doing it for friends and family and stuff like that. But more so, I had started 2 other businesses. So I started a Amazon business with Johnny. And he was my first intro person. He taught me a lot about how to get through rough moments. We would come up against these moments where Amazon, and if anybody's ever done Amazon, it's kind of difficult because you're working with a lot of bots. They'll shut you down very quickly. And so my mindset at the time, I had a massive fear of failure. I had kind of like a fear of rejection. And so in these moments when that would happen, we'd spend all this money on producing the products and stuff. My like attention to keep going, or my drive to keep going was like this. Okay. He taught me something just by observing him. This is why you got to put yourself around good people.
Yeah.
He taught me so much about like, okay, we'll figure it out. Okay, we'll find a way. Okay, no big deal. I'll figure it out by end of night. And I would just watch him do this over and over again. And I was like, and it changed me. It had an effect on me. Like I was no longer the girl who's like, oh my God, it's doom and gloom. It's over. It's the end of the road. Yeah, it was really cool. So being around good people who will influence your growth, he definitely like helped me rise up to another version of myself. And he was doing a lot of content too. So I would see him do it. So if you want to do content, like maybe get to know a content person, or there's so many free courses out there that can help you. You know, that was probably step 1. I ended up later on in my career, I'm going to say this, just very full transparency. A big part of my career when I really got hired onto the company, like I didn't have to do the content.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have to. So I was in a healing phase. I had a really tragic year. It was 2.5 years ago. I completely shut down that part of myself and was just like, I just want to work. I just want to help people. I just want to better myself. But I watched this person do it, right? So again, we're watching. So finally, when it was time for me to like fly the coop, fly and do my own thing, I made a decision to start my own business 2 years later. I never thought I wanted to do that. But part of it was like, let me practice content. This is one thing, like this is an easy way to connect with people. This is an easy way to give value.
Yeah.
To give, like especially so many of those creators had given to me. It was like, maybe I could do that. I've studied this. I've studied my skill. Like, I think it's time for me to give. Okay, but I didn't know anything about content, right? I didn't know much about it. All I knew is the TikToks me and my daughter were making. And so it began by getting a mentor. Like I asked the mentor that I had a little bit, and then he was very busy. So then I hired a mentor, right, who taught me like ads, who taught me hooks, who taught me call to action, who taught me how to like rage bait, stuff like that. And I was just like, oh no, I didn't know any of this. The more you explore, the more you're going to get. The more you push yourself into it, you're just going to get so much back. It's inevitable. You'll keep growing.
And it's worth noting, to your point, in how you worked through this journey. Again, it's wild to me how similar, at least this season that I'm in, feels like you're reflecting that too, because it's worth telling people at home, if you're struggling really, really hard, if you're at your wit's end, right? Like if all you can think about is how bad it is, that means that it's going to take you some time to fill back up that cup. That means that you're operating on empty, and you need some time to have, to your point. One of the things that I love is when you said you were kind of doing that audit of what were you consuming. What you consume looks like food, sleep. It looks like entertainment. It looks like music. Every single thing that we interact with in the day. And that, for me, I've even noticed can just be the amount of times I am tangibly touching technology. Like all of these things can play such a factor into what is going to happen in your mind.
Right.
And I've even seen somebody that is like a comedian online. I Elise Myers, I love her so much. She's hilarious, and she's such this like bright light. And yet she even had said, I realized I was not feeling all right, and I was wondering why I wasn't feeling all right. And she's like, and I realized it's because all of my programs that I love, my friends on my programs, these characters on these shows, they weren't doing all right.
Yeah.
And she's like, and so for a second I had to like, you have a connection with these musicians, you have a connection with this music, you have a connection with this content, and sometimes you need to give yourself a break.
Yes.
And you can reprogram your entire life. It's worth noting you can reprogram your algorithm.
Well, and let's explain that a little bit. I just put a post up about this, a couple of them. What we're talking about is something called limbic synchronicity. So it's mirroring, it's modeling. If we're around people long enough, we will start to mirror and model them.
Yep.
It's like a mechanism that's wired and encoded with us because it creates connection.
Yeah.
And if you think way back in like tribal times and stuff like that, we needed to connect to survive. And I mean, connection is so important even now today. But what happens is if you're around the wrong people, even if you're watching the wrong content, you're starting to mirror that, because if you look up at something, if you admire something, those mirror neurons kick in and we start to mirror those things. So if you're watching somebody having a bad day and then you start to notice yourself having a bad day, it's like, there's something to this. What if I were to put myself around people who are having great days, people who are inspired, people who aren't talking about people, but they're talking about ideas? I heard that quote. That's not mine.
I think it's Elizabeth. Oh, keep going.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, are we talking? So what are we talking about? Like, what have we been what have I been talking about? What have I been consuming? I love the food thing too. You mentioned that. Because your physical well-being matters too. It plays a part into it for sure. So yeah, it's when you start to look at it from that science perspective of we mirror these things.
Yeah.
You got to be cautious about what content you're consuming.
I love that perspective, especially that clinical perspective on it, because I think that the throwaway cultural like mantra is like, you are who you hang out with, or you are the sum total of the people that are closest to you, or whatever it might be. And I think that there's, can we speak to, we have so much to get into obviously, and we still have some time, but like, can we speak a little bit to, from the perspective of somebody that has a loved one having a hard time? How are you able to, from a clinical perspective or from an experience perspective, how are you able to show up for that person and provide the right support that they need without absorbing that energy? And maybe how can you infuse some of that contrary ideation into their life?
That's a great point. There's going to be a couple things I can recommend to this. I had somebody very close to me going through a really, really, really hard time. And it was so close to the point where it's like you connect in a level of like, I'm going to drown with you. But you can't do that. You can't help somebody from that point.
Yeah.
So the best thing, if you see somebody you truly care about, you need to maintain your well-being so that you can be that light that they can go to. You can't meet somebody where they're at and hope to get them better. Okay, so a lot of it is, what are you doing for you?
Yeah.
You know how you said earlier, like you can't pour from an empty cup? You really can't. Like, I think it was Abraham Hicks who said, she's like, sick can't make sick well. Anger can't make anger happy. And I like, it just, that one really hit me. I was like, oh yeah, like we talk about empathy, right? Empathy is a huge word in the last couple of years. Like, I'm an empath.
Yeah.
And it seems like a good thing, but truly it
can be crippling.
It can be so crippling. Like,
Keep going, sorry.
no, it can be so crippling because if you're empathizing to the point where you forget to stay in alignment with where you're going, the light that you are, the work that you've done, you're going to where they're at. How do we help somebody from that point of view? So I would say if you plan on pouring into somebody, you can help anybody. You can help them with a smile. You can help them with a kind word.
Yeah.
But just be cautious and take care of yourself so that you can continue to pour into them. And the second part I'll say about that is if you see somebody who's very low, like low past the point where you don't know what to do, it's probably time to get help.
Yeah.
Okay, because I can say somebody in my life was watching me go through this with a very close loved one of mine. And I was so close to this person, so tied into them that I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And it was crippling for me. And somebody came along and they're like, you're not the professional. You may be the professional at other people, but this relationship is one that is so close.
Yep.
You're blinded. You should have called XYZ a long time ago, but because you're so emotionally attached, you are blinded. There's people who specialize with this. It's time to call them. It's time to call the experts. So if you ever see somebody who's getting that low, like, don't feel like the bad person for doing the right thing for their well-being if you don't know how to help.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the best thing we can do. Like I've had clients where obviously my business focuses on, yes, confidence, healing, trauma healing, and businesses and entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
But there are certain levels where I'm like, oh my gosh, this person's brain is so shut off. Like, let's call the right people.
Yeah.
Like that's my responsibility to them. So there's a couple points to that. It's like, take care of yourself. Take care of yourself so you can pour into them.
Mm-hmm.
Maintain yourself.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you get to the point where you realize you need outside help, don't hesitate to ask. Like, that's a game changer.
And I think that that's so crucial even for me to hear because, like I said, I went through this version of my story alone. Predominantly, I was handling most of it. Just thankfully, I was able to navigate it through most of the steps we've talked about: reprogramming the mind, reprogramming what you are taking in, filling your cup, making it so that the only thing that touches you is light. So I was able to move through this without, medication or intervention, which is so important for those that it does work for. I absolutely want to articulate that. Please pursue any type of help that will be able to restore your mind to you and your will to live. But at the same point, I had a friend, like 6 months later, call me that I hadn't seen in years, that I hadn't had the chance to really be part of this person's life in a while. Yeah. And I had just had it on my heart to check in and just say, hey, how you doing? I couldn't quiet the tug on my heart that I needed to check in on this person. And I get a call that they're done, that they've just, they're about ready to drive their car off a cliff because it's too much and there's no way to fix it and there's no way out. And I struggled with that exact tension of, how do I be everything I can be to this person? How do I leverage the experience that I lived through and the healing that I've received to try and imbue that into them as well? And at what point is it no longer my not responsibility, because I don't think anybody's trying to shy away from responsibility. Yeah. At what point is it beyond my pay grade to actually go in? I had somebody that was a mentor to me in my life that knew about this, saying, you can't be everything to that person from here. You have to call someone. And I didn't know how to make that call because there's that tension of feeling like, is it betraying somebody when they think they're okay, but you can tell that they're not, and their words have weight, and maybe they don't think their words have weight. We know passive ideation is a thing. And so I think it's a great validation to those of us listening that be the friend that is willing to make, or the family member that's willing to make the call despite what they might want, because you know what they might need. Yeah. And also, if and when you have such a dark moment and somebody reaches out to try and provide help that might look like an attack to you, it's because that help is attacking that lie in your mind, telling you to end it. You have to realize there's going to be a tension. Oh, yeah. In order to overcome and to get past that, you have to kill the thought. Yep. Versus letting it kill you.
There's so much there. That's so please. True. So I have two things to say to that. I was watching a podcast actually the other day. It was with Marcel Klein, he's a hypnotist, and Chase Hughes. He specializes in studying the body and people and their mindsets, and it was just absolutely amazing. But what he was saying about this specific topic was that you can kind of like tell when somebody's getting to that point. Because, and I'm going to chop this up, so sorry if they ever watch this. He was saying that usually they start losing loss of purpose, loss of excitement for life. Like the days start to roll into the next day. And he's like, you can kind of tell when somebody's mind is starting to go there. And most people don't want this. They just don't know how to ask for help. I look at the brain and I'm not a neuroscientist, but I try and read as much as I can because it's just fascinating. The brain, Dr. Joe Dispenza will talk about this a lot, that when we're in fight or flight, right, that's stress, that's anxiety, we're in fight or flight, the brain tends to focus on whatever we're stressing on and like hyper focus on that. Yep. So now we're focused on the thing that's stressing us out, the pain, and now it becomes a continual obsession with this thing. A loop, right? So people aren't really able to get out of it a lot of the times on their own. Like you almost, and in hypnosis, we call this a pattern interrupt. You need something like jolting to get your mind away from that and to bring you back to reality. And a lot of people don't have that in the moment, especially like your situation, you were by yourself. Yeah. So your situation was very unique that you were able to be like, wait a minute. I'm not my thoughts. I'm now observing my thoughts. That was amazing. But I think for somebody maybe who hasn't gotten to the observer of their thoughts moment, understand that, your mind's kind of designed to look for a threat. And if you're in survival mode, you're not going to be in creative mode. You're not going to be in excitement and all this stuff. You're going to be like honing in on the thing that's stressing you out, which maybe it's that pain or that breakup or that job loss or the problems with your family or whatever happened, the pain. And then the pain grows because you're focusing on it more.
You're feeding it.
You're feeding it and it gets bigger. And it's like, that's kind of what your brain's designed to do until you figure it out. Most people don't always have the tools to figure it out. I know for me, like in the beginning, like I still like to see a hypnotist or a therapist or something because me in my own mind, I can absolutely get lost in my own mind. I'm like, what about this? What about that? What about...
Yeah.
Right? It's so important to have another perspective that can help you, pull you out of that moment. But sometimes it's not me or you, right? Like you said, that's above my pay grade. So, and not that it's like, we're talking about it like that, but you're in the podcast space and all the other amazing things you've done. I know you're a journalist and so many amazing things.
Thank you.
But there's people who study the suicidal ideation to be specifically helpful. So it's like, wait a minute, let's call in the experts.
Yeah.
You know, one of my clients, and gosh, he was so brave. He's doing so well now. But he had a moment where we had to come to that moment and we had a conversation and we just had a conversation together. We're like, hey, it's not that big of a deal. It's okay. What if we get some help?
Yeah.
And it was so beautiful to come to this moment of like, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay if we're not okay, but let's not stay here.
100%.
You know?
And one of the things that that came up in my mind in this process is like, especially as women, like shame is just such a thing that we wear underneath our skin, right? Like our skin has been shamed in this world. Oh, yeah. And no matter how we present ourselves in this world, there's a shameful edge of how we should be, right? You could be following the most cookie cutter traditional version of what makes a good woman or a good professional or a good mother or a good business owner or whatever it might be. And there's still going to be shame about the part of it that you're not or the way that you're not showing up.
Yeah.
And I think that there's so much shame rooted in the idea of being at, let's say, quote unquote, rock bottom. Yeah. I look at it in my life, because I can only speak out of my lived experience and those that I've known, right? Yeah. As I look at my rock bottom, and the one thing I think I've been blessed to have the opportunity to do is to look at it and say, this is bad. This feels bad. This is not fun. I don't know how this is going to be fixed. But if this is my baseline, if this is the bottom of the ocean, look at how blessed my life is. Look at the trees. Look at the breath in my lungs. Look at the fact that I have limbs. Look at the fact that I have work. Look at the fact that there are people out there that are willing to call me and check in. And not everybody has, everybody's situation is different. And a lot of the time you can get to your rock bottom without anyone near you, right? And I think it's so important to, instead of viewing that moment with shame, like, oh, how did I let myself get here? Or look how much lower I am than others around me. Or look at how much work it's going to take to get past this. Look at it with joy, like an opportunity. Say, whoa, if you can name the moment that you're starting from, your baseline as that bottom, look at it as the ocean and just think about the more that you swim, you're going to encounter so many different beautiful things. You have beautiful things lying around you on that. There's coral, there's fish, there's crabs down there with you that can make that moment still worthwhile. And then the process of rebuilding can be fun. It can be painful. That's not to diminish it whatsoever. But if we can keep that mindset of there's a way to make this into the thing that, this is my shedding of a chrysalis. This is my transformation. This is the opportunity to, because I don't know about you guys, I think that the most incredible people I've ever known, the ones that I look up to, the ones that create the content that change people's lives, they got there through struggling. They got there through confronting themselves and their own demons and the things that they battle against and the things that have hurt them. And they've done that work. And so you don't necessarily get to a place of moving the needle in the world and being of service to other people, which feels so good, if you haven't had to claw through some really dark moments, right?
Yeah. I think that's life. And a lot of times we get addicted to these good moments, like even in this spiritual community, like and just performance and personal development, like they call it spiritual bypassing when you get addicted to the highs, right? Like, and we love that because that feels good. But like really, if we acknowledge it, it's like most people's stories do have these moments. And if you can say, yeah, that's going to happen. Like that's going to happen. and not shame yourself for it, there's something really beautiful that can happen. You can use those moments. And exactly what you're talking about is hypnosis. It's reframing the mind. You can choose to look at something one way, but you can actually choose anytime you want to look at it a completely different way.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying is like, wait, shame doesn't seem to work in these moments.
No.
Right? Like, and think about it. Think about it this way. If somebody were to come and tell you something and just be really mean to you and like really just like, God, I cannot believe you did that, right? And they're just really just beating you up. Like, are you going to respond well to that?
No.
No. Okay, so why do you think you speaking to yourself like that would respond well? When we really stop and think about it, this is where that inner child work comes in, right?
Yeah.
Like imagine 3, 4, 5, 7-year-old you is standing right here and you're just like, okay, let me teach them a lesson, right? And you start rejecting the hell out of them because they had a moment of life that led them to a rock bottom.
Yeah.
You think that child's going to feel good and uplifted, or do you think maybe there's a better approach?
Yeah.
So what you're talking about is reframing those moments in your mind, which is so beautiful because anybody can do this. You say, wait a minute, this isn't the end of the road. Let me see how I can use this as an opportunity for growth. You can come back from anything.
You can come back.
Like, God, that was such a big part of my story even 2.5 years ago.
Because you were just mentioning you had such a, and the woman in front of us is so poised and so articulate, and you bubble even in between the moments of sadness. And so tell us, please, about how you are able to have that rebound rate, if you will.
So I will say this with hypnosis, and there's a lot of modalities. I could just only speak on the one that I've like absolutely been obsessed with, right? Yeah. Hypnosis, I worked with a hypnotist probably about 5 years ago. And then I was studying the program. So little did I know, as I was studying it, I was healing myself. One of the things I kind of really believe that I hypnotized myself to do was to be unstoppable, to never stop, to always continue, to never give up, to always keep going, to overcome any challenge, any obstacle. And so I stayed sober for the year, right? Remember I had the agreement. And then I was like, you know, little me thought like, oh, I did the year. I'm healed. I'm good now.
Yeah.
I went back to drinking. And it didn't go very well. In fact, it was just stealing from my energy. It was stealing from my direction, my focus, my productivity. But I tried to like dabble in both. You know, like I'm going in a really positive direction, but like I'm also still wearing some of my masks because I'm not really ready to lose them yet. And that's okay to be there.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's just a part of it, right? What I found is you can't be in both worlds. But, you know, 2.5 years ago, this is going to be a hard part of it, so just brace yourselves. My mom was murdered 2.5 years ago. Oh, my gosh. And it was just this other moment. Like my life, it felt once again, it was this rock bottom, like life was crashing down. Like I'll never forget it. I was at lunch with somebody I was dating who was just absolutely terrible. Again, right? Still settling for things. And I got a call and I got the call and it had happened and all these things went through my mind. And I called my hypnotist like 2 days later and I was like, I know I'm going to need you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I don't know. Because there was moments of that where like she had called me. She had called us 2 days before. And she was kind of talking about, my mom always suffered from addiction. So it was a very hard relationship to be like, I love you so much and I want to save you. But you're actually doing a really good job of saving yourself right now. And I don't want to interrupt because I want to see where you take this. But she had this moment where she called and she was just kind of talking about it briefly. And something was like, maybe I should go pick her up. And then I didn't do it because I was like, maybe it could be bad because, you know, who does she bring with her? I don't know. My daughter, all these things. And then we got the call 2 days later. So it was like this, I can't undo that. Like and for 2 months, I spiraled. I said I wasn't going to drink over this. And for those 2 months, man, did I drink. And the guilt, the shame, everything. And I was trying to keep it all composed. Like, oh, nope, I'm perfectly fine. I grieve fine. Like, it's okay. I remember friends and family coming over to the house and I was trying to host amidst this. Like, my brain was like, I can't comprehend what just happened. But I ended up going, for anybody dealing with grief, like, please be gentle on yourself because I even tried to go, I think I went to, like, my friends were like, let's go out. Let's do this. Let's do that. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm great. I was just absolutely numb. But I was trying to do whatever I could to get myself out of that. And it was this other rock bottom. And some other things were happening simultaneously that were rock bottom. The place I was living was not a good situation. My daughter was having her own struggles. And it was just, the world was crashing. I ended up having a full breakdown because of the drinking again. Like, it was 2 months into it. Got arrested, let's just say. I'm not welcome at the W in a certain state.
Okay.
Okay. Went Motley Crue in a hotel room because it just all came out one day. And I got arrested, so I was in a jail cell, and I just remember laying there. And it was this like humbling moment of like, they had put me by myself because they knew the situation. They just heard me rambling in my like drunk state of like, all of it came crashing out. Like, I can't believe this is happening. And what I noticed was like this compassion for my mom. Like, I had these moments of judgment, these moments of like, I thought what I was doing was so much better than what she was doing. We both suffered from addiction. And it was this moment of like, oh my God, I'm here. I'm in jail. I'm in a bad relationship. I'm addicted. I am you. Mm-hmm. And it was like, it was crushing the fact that I couldn't get her back to say that to her.
Yeah.
Like, all I wanted was to be able to, like, I had this overwhelming sense of, I want to say sorry, but I can't. Mm-hmm. And so I thought about it, and I was like, okay, something happened in that cell. I swear God was with me. Like, something happened, because it was like, that voice again. You can either choose to continue what you're doing and die with her.
Yeah.
Or you can get up and you can like live whatever time you have left and live it to the absolute fullest and take her with you. You could do all the things you've ever wanted to do. You could change the generational trauma and once again come back, because what she couldn't do for us, maybe I can. What she was trying to, maybe I can. And maybe if I do this, maybe I can give it to other people too. Mm-hmm. You know, and within 6 months, like, I had cut off. You talked about going alone. We go alone in those moments, right? You have to go inward. And so a lot of my friends at the time, they couldn't understand me. Mm-hmm. Like, I all the masks came down. Mm-hmm. It was like faced with the harsh reality of like, once again, like those monster moments that I talked about, like they're called shadows, right? But you learn to love your shadows. You learn to see them without judgment. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of time I spent alone. I moved out right away. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I was like, moved out. I got my daughter in a better situation. I started taking, like, really, we realized how rough she was having it too. Mm-hmm. And we really dived into taking care of her and her well-being. But within 6 months, this is why I say, like, change can happen so fast. Within 6 months, I had programmed my mind to create my dream life, and I did. I was helping people. I was absolutely obsessed with hypnosis. I was getting people results in their businesses, like just incredible results, like 10xing their income. It was crazy. Mm-hmm. But me and my daughter had a better relationship than ever before. I was living in the house, or in the high rise that I had envisioned for myself. Mm-hmm. So I had programmed it, but I really stopped and thought about it, and I was like, how did I survive that moment?
Yeah.
I think I honestly credit it to I had put like some blocker, not a blocker, but a blocker in my mind that said giving up's an option. And I had put something in my mind, call it positive brainwashing with hypnosis. I will never give up. I will always keep going. I will always survive. I will always thrive. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I look back and I'm like, I don't know what would have happened if I didn't do that.
Yeah.
And not to mention, the first time around with hypnosis caused me to realize, like, a lot of the pain was coming from I was holding anger towards my mom. Mm-hmm. And so prior to her passing, we had these moments of, like, reconnecting where I was like, I'm so angry at you, but I'm hurting myself. Like, I'm not hurting you.
Yeah.
I'm hurting me.
They say, right, like, unforgiveness and anger hurts you more than the other person.
Yeah. And so it was, like, this moment where, like, I remember, like, I got to hug her. I got to give her stuff. I got to give her like clothes and makeup, because she was living on the streets for a long time, and she wouldn't leave. So it was like we were doing what we could, but it was these moments where it's like, I'm not mad at you. I love you. Like, and the situation prior, like if I hadn't done that work and didn't have that moment, we'd be in a very different situation right now.
Oh yeah.
You know?
And I think there's so many really profound things I want to touch on real quickly before we continue trekking on through your journey, which is that the fact that you said that in that moment, how did you survive it? There are things that we don't even know we consume that are helpful. We consume safe holds throughout our life.
Yeah.
And sometimes they appear in the moment when we need them. We might not
Yeah.
realize we even learned it, right? There's people that don't even realize they know German, and suddenly they do, right? There's so much information we are consuming throughout our entire existence. Sometimes that can manifest in the moment you need it most. You said you feel like God showed up in the cell that night, and
Yeah.
I feel like that's usually the environment when there are moments of like divine intervention, right? Is you can make a choice and your life can change completely.
Yeah.
And to your point, also with the generational trauma, that is something that I think the world is finally really waking up to across every type of philosophy and society and cultural. This is real. And not only can psychological habits and things pass through, they can actually become truly in your DNA, like
In your DNA.
biological. It can be learned because you're observing your parent behaving that way. It can be atmospheric in that, your people are saying these things to you, right? But it can also be in your DNA because alcoholism, things of that nature, we see that it actually metastasizes in the body and it becomes something you can pass on. And so the fact that you even mentioned that your daughter was battling because of bullying, a child's mind is not thinking about death. A child's mind is thinking about immortality.
Yeah.
A child's mind isn't even aware of the passage of time or the depth of experience. And so for that to have been something in her journey even, and the fact that you were able to recognize maybe this ends with me so that she doesn't have to go through the same work. I think that that's so beautiful. And I thank you for having put yourself in the position to close that gap because, man, you're just the way you're going to set her up for success in life, the way that obviously you've completely radically retransformed your life in that amount of time, I think is hopeful for anybody that's watching and thinks that today is all you have. No, actually, your tomorrow could be radically different. If you give yourself to your point, that idea, I'm never going to just end it now. I'm going to give it one more day.
Yeah.
And so to get back to your actual journey as a creator and as a hypnotist, you mentioned that, you've seen these huge gains for clients with this work. Can you tell us, I know that you target a lot of executives and a lot of people that probably have minds that are very, very active and very, very stressful. And I actually, I was involved in the development of a book once upon a time that was actually speaking specifically to the entrepreneurial mind and the markers in that brain and in that chemistry that makes someone capable of going out and doing something bold that no one's done before and having the grit and the tenacity and the temerity to actually stick with it when the walls are crashing down around you and you have to sell everything you own in order just to make payroll, right? Like that type of mindset has a very different chemistry to it in order for it to thrive. And a lot of that chemistry can be very crippling to the person. It can be OCD. It can be ADD. It can be self-loathing. It can be trying to fight against a version of yourself or of the world that you don't like. And so with that, can you speak a little bit to how your work has, what drew you to that particular type of clientele and how this work really works well with them?
Actually, to be honest with you, I always thought I'd end up working with addicts, right? We were on the opioids nonprofit thing. However, the mentor I happened to work with and then my own journey was entrepreneurship. And I didn't even realize it. It was like I had two businesses. I had the hair business and then, because I was a hairstylist prior to that, and then I had the Amazon business and then I started this over here, and the person that I was working with, that's what they specialized in. So my mentor, that's what he trained me to work with. That's the minds he trained me to work with. And I had no idea, that's the level that I was going to be playing at. I didn't know. I always thought I was going to be people with trauma and addiction. And to some degree, I realized there's so many similarities in the minds of all these people, but there is differences, right? In my younger years, I was working at a real estate company, training real estate agents how to grow their businesses, how to grow their teams and stuff like that. But we would study through a disc assessment, the types of minds. So I remember watching two people. There were two of the owners of the company. And it was like mom and dad. That's what I kept watching. I was like, she happens to, husband and wife. I'm like, but they weren't. They were just two business partners. But she had a different disc assessment than him. She had an ability to ground him. He was the type of the entrepreneurial mind that you're talking about, who's just obsessive, OCD, thinks big. And I realized I'm like, you need that. You need that to make some of these things happen. And they balanced each other out so much, but is there a way to get those things within one person? Is there a way to train this into that mind? And so how do we do it? So a lot of it comes back to this breakthrough process that we use with entrepreneurs is a lot of times they're facing a struggle, right? And they only know the surface level of that struggle. I'm procrastinating. I'm OCD. I can't think clearly. So they only know the surface level problem of it. Where in, any psychological field, any psychology, usually they're studying not only just the conscious mind, but the subconscious mind.
Yeah.
So where they understand the surface level problem, we're looking at, okay, what are the subconscious things that are driving this behavior? And with hypnosis, you can really get somebody to shift a perspective by putting them into an altered state of conscious awareness. It means that their brainwaves are slowing down. And so a lot of times we actually go into the state unknowingly. You can go, well, you're driving down the street on a familiar route, or if you're reading a book and you get really in tuned with that book, it's like hyper state of focus awareness into that book, where if somebody tapped you on the shoulder, you might jolt a little bit, right? Because you're so into it. Or
It's like
movie.
autopilot and then flow state, right? Like those
Yes.
two.
Exactly. So with this mind, you kind of want to see their upbringing is going to play a part in it. A book that explains this really well, that I've been really just hooked on for the audience, if you guys want to get this book, I'm not endorsing it or anything like that. Like I maybe should be, but it's like, I think it's called 177 Mental Toughness Acts of World Champions.
Okay.
I forgot the author, but it's 1 page a day, and they talk about belief systems. And in hypnosis, we often talk about changing a belief system. So with that entrepreneurial mind, it's like they're operating at such a high level, and they're focused on where they're going and focused on a lot of things, but their subconscious mind may have these drivers that are either pain motivation, that are actually focusing on the thing they don't want, or do I deserve this, or can I sustain this? And it's all subconscious. It's just a little bit of noise in the background based off their upbringing, right? Like we were talking about earlier, not everybody's born into that role. A lot of people go through trials and different things and rock bottoms and then find their way up there. But that doesn't mean necessarily their identity is aligned with that version.
Yeah.
So that's why you see people who like, they win the lottery, or there's like a statistic on it that eventually they like lose all the money within 5 years, right? Because their identity is not aligned with a rich mindset, an entrepreneur mindset. So where we go in is we're finding that they are just like anybody else. They have blocks, they have limiting beliefs. They need to like have a moment for themselves to have those moments of awareness. What's driving my procrastination? What's driving my self-sabotage?
Yeah.
And a lot of it is always going to come back to their childhood and their influences and what they learned about money. So I could have somebody who's just barely starting a business, or they're in an executive position, and you could have somebody who's a millionaire who's doing like working at a very high level of production, and they're both going to have limiting beliefs, and sometimes the limiting belief is the same. It's just where they got their information from, where their senses gave them that data from, is unique to their own experiences, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we reframe those. We reframe those moments for them, because it's, again, you can choose to observe any memory from a better perspective.
I love that so much. Gosh, the time runs out so quickly. I think we're just almost at the hour, and I want to make sure that we're able to tap on as much of your story as we can. So you're in this place now where you mentioned having completely transformed your life, transformed your thinking, and you are in this place of now being able to serve more than even just your clients, right? With these tool sets. And a lot of that has to do with the content that you put out there for the world, the way you consumed content to help you. So what is the plan next with that in mind? How do you plan to use your channels to continue amplifying this work? And you mentioned having consumed a bunch of courses, even like that there are free courses. Do you have any plans in the future to actually put your teachings into that kind of format?
Yeah, I'm currently in the process of that. Right now, if you message me on Instagram, I do have like visualization cheat sheets that can help get you in that process of like focusing your attention. There's so many free opportunities out there too, but I absolutely do want to get this into a course. I believe, going into that future direction it's just so expansive. The possibilities are endless. But I know I do want to serve. I want to help. I want to inspire people to find their niche and for them to get out and help, because it's like this ripple effect. you don't have to. There's one post that I put up the other day. I'm like, you don't have to be the expert to help somebody.
Mm-mm.
You've overcome your unique experiences, and somebody explained this one time, like karate belts. So they're like, you may be at a yellow, but you can help everybody before yellow get to yellow. And so there's so many people in this world. You can make an impact.
Yeah.
Just know what's important to you. I think one of the things we were talking about earlier was how to be directional with your content. I think understand your voice, understand what you're passionate about, what you're purposeful about, and what you want to give.
Yeah.
Right? Really understand your product.
Yeah.
Okay? When you understand your product, the next step is you want to understand your audience so you can speak to that audience. I think one of the biggest mistakes I made in the beginning of my career was trying to speak to everything.
Yeah.
Right. And then also like getting mixed up in different niches because I had the hair business, I had this one, I had that. Right. So dial it in, focus, understand your product.
Yeah.
Okay. Now understand your audience. And here's the thing. You can never give enough away. Like,
No.
don't feel like, oh my gosh, I can't give that away because then that's giving too much. No, actually, a mentor of mine, Mike Barron, he said, when you feel like you're giving too much away, like it hurts you and you're giving too much away, he's like, that's when you know you did it.
100%.
Give, give, give. It'll always come back to you because here's the thing. People are going to come back and you're helping them and you don't know who they're going to go out and help. One of my clients, he, and I didn't know this. This is one of my like ear perk up moments and wake up moments for myself. I had no idea. He was helping children in Africa and helping like human trafficking and fighting against that. And I remember one day we were just sitting in session and I thought like, man, like we would just, have these performance coaching sessions or hypnosis sessions. And I was like, am I really making an impact? It was those moments of like, we all have those like, am I in the right spot? You feel stuck or you feel self-doubt for a moment. I had that moment. And I think one day he told me, he's like, it's because of you that I can go out and be that for other people. And I was like, wait, what, little me? Like and that part was so powerful of like, oh, I'm just here. I'm here just being me, just doing my part, just giving what I've learned, what my experiences have taught me. And then this guy's going to go out and make his own unique impact in the world. So don't hesitate on helping. Start the content. Okay. Another thing I want to give you is I waited. Another big mistake I made was I waited. I let fear get in the way. You're not going to be good at it right away, okay? You're just not. Unless you get a coach, okay? But give yourself permission to suck at it. Like Mel Robbins talks about that all the time. Give yourself permission to get good at it, to learn. And you know what? If you start now and you keep going, you're just going to get better and better and better. Versus if you don't start and you just hope to automatically be good in a year, it's not going to happen like that. Start now. Just put it on your calendar. Start now.
Yes. It's funny because we've heard that actually come up from almost every creator that's been in this seat has said the same thing. There's never going to be a perfect time to start your content. You're never going to have, you might at some point, maybe magically before you begin, have the best kind of equipment in the world that you could. Yeah. But most people aren't. No. And we've heard people say, start when you're nervous, start when you're scared, start when you are ill prepared in your mind, because you will grow and your audience will grow with you. You'll find the right people. They'll be drawn to your story and to your content. And to your point, I think what's so interesting is that especially when it comes to the online world and social media and digital technologies, you very often aren't going to see the impact that you're making, or you're very likely not going to see the fruit of the work you're putting in directly, right? Like you are the fruit and the impact of some of those creators that you were watching, right? And you might know them or you might never meet them, but it doesn't change the fact that they played a part in changing your life. And that's true for all of us. You could be the thing that causes someone to laugh that day with a silly dance video that just infuses that little blip of serotonin and joy that might get them out of a loop, or you might be able to actually share your experience of pain in a way that knocks someone else out of that loop as well. So I love that too, where it's about, don't let, again, there's some, I call them lies of the mind, where they are convincing you of things that just aren't true. And the idea that people care about whether or not you fail. They don't. They don't. In fact, a lot of people are rooting for your failure, if we're being honest. In your life, there's going to be people, and it's not malicious most of the time. No. It's just because they're going through their own stuff. Yeah. And it's really hard when you're in it to see someone else thrive or to see someone else succeed. So rather than let yourself be bound by the idea of, oh, what if I fail? to fail is a privilege because it means that you started and that you were brave enough to do it, right?
Yeah, reframe that in your mind too. Like, hey, if I'm failing, I'm in movement. Like, I think with discipline and with failure and rejection, we often have from our childhood, a perception, a negative perception of those things. But reframe that for yourself. You can reframe it at any time. Like, where did I learn? What is my honest opinion about discipline?
Yeah.
What's my honest opinion about failing? And go with the first answer that comes to mind, the very first answer, because that's your subconscious mind speaking truth to you.
Okay.
Okay. And if it says, I don't like discipline. I'm scared to fail. Cool. Amazing. Now you know what you need to work on. Okay, so make failure, or make not failure familiar, but make it okay that, hey, if I fail, it's because I'm learning something, which means I'm getting better at it. Or discipline. Okay, so discipline from parents, right? Like we think discipline, it didn't feel so good when we were younger. But imagine saying, hey, discipline's the highest form of me loving myself. Discipline is keeping me to my commitments. Discipline is beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
It's challenging and it's beautiful. But you just reframe the way you think about something. And it's
100%.
so easy just to have a little shift of perspective and have massive results in your life.
There's so many things that you're saying that I want to articulate for the audience just how true a lot of this is, which is, I remember even having this conversation with my mother recently. It was last night. And I noticed that there's been a certain limiting belief that she has vocalized, I think, her entire life about herself. And I know it's even more present in her than she vocalizes it, because you can see it almost to the 15 minutes. You can see it pop up.
Yeah.
You can see it on her face. You can see it in the way she's moving. There's this thing in her mind that tells her that this thing makes her this way.
Yeah.
Right? And last night, I was asking her a question about that thing. And there's so many truths in her life that blatantly contradict that lie, right? And I could tell when she mentioned that it goes back to when she was learning about herself and how, and in school, as a young person, she was gaining her identity in the lens of this lie that I think even was just the limitation of science and culture back then about how our minds work, how our learning styles work, how our brain works. But I remember saying to her last night, Mom, what if it's not that you are less than because of this? What if it's actually a superpower because it means that you're able to do this type of thing with your brain?
Yeah.
In addition to what I know, all the facts of the case are that you are somebody that's incredibly intelligent and can consume content so quickly and can remember it and can speak into people. Like, you're so much more powerful than you know. What if you flip the script and instead of looking at it as a weakness that makes you shameful, why don't you look at it like a superpower?
Yeah.
And I told her, I was like, just try it tonight. Do me a favor, and before you go to sleep, just say it to yourself, I have this superpower. And I said, in the morning, just tell me how it feels. Does it still feel like a lie that you don't have that superpower? Or after sleeping on it for one night, does it feel like there might be some truth there? And ironically, I haven't had the chance to talk to my mom yet this morning to see how it landed. But it's funny that you mentioned that, because it's just about becoming familiar enough with your mind. And with the parts of yourself that are sabotaging yourself, and that are invading your mind from other outside. There's so many different types of outside attacks that can come through and manifest internally. Is there any last thing that you are working on that you want us to be aware of before we wrap this episode?
Yeah, so you could always follow me on my Instagram, robin.kimery. And then I do have a couple free resources that I can give out. And I'd love for you guys to have this, my magnetic confidence hypnosis. That you can absolutely have if you feel like you're struggling with confidence. Or I have a visualization cheat sheet if it's also a training, and it's going to help you really get to know that first step that I was talking about with the inner child. And it doesn't have to be an inner child. It doesn't have to be, doom and gloom. It can also be really the best version of yourself, right? But that's an amazing tool that I'd like to give away, and it's free. And for me, I think, where am I headed? This year is going to be bigger than ever. We're going to impact more lives, and I hope to impact your life and raise you up so you can go impact your family, your community, the people that you know, and they're going to go impact more people. And it's just this ripple effect, because I think the world is seeing that now. We need a lot more support and love and just generosity, and it starts with you. It starts with you. So I think there's a quote by Neville Goddard that I want to leave you with, is change the conception of yourself and you will watch the world around you change too. It starts with you, okay? And that ties into so many various laws, but the law of attraction, the law of vibration, it starts with you. You are the magic, okay? So a lot of times we get it mixed up thinking it's all the physical things. I need that physical thing. I need that physical thing. But you are the creator. It starts with here. Your ideas, your thoughts, they become things. So give yourself credit. Try, just take action, and you're going to create something new. And you'll watch the world around you change. You absolutely will. I've seen it, and it can happen fast. Don't think it has to take forever. It can absolutely happen fast.
Look at us. It can happen pretty fast, right? I'm so
Yes.
grateful that you came in today. I'm so grateful that you stayed. Right?
you.
And that you are here with us and that you have so much to offer this world. We will have links to everything in the description to make sure that people are able to stay tuned with what you have coming up. And for those of you watching at home or listening online, we just want to say again, thank you for giving this show a little bit of your time and attention. I know that there's endless opportunities to be entertained online and there's endless distractions, and all we want to do is have this place be a resource for you. One of the things that's so important to the creator experience is not feeling alone, even if you need to create or heal in isolation. Just we don't want anybody to actually feel alone. So we have several different types of ways that you can connect and communicate with us and with each other. And one of those is that we have a creator Slack channel, a dedicated forum for you guys to be able to actually engage and resource share and learn from each other and get to know each other and really be part of that FCBC fam. And we encourage you to sign up for that so that we can connect with you. Feel free to reach out at any of the touch points we have listed, whether that's email or social media or in the comments, to let us know the kind of content and the kind of creators and the kind of challenges that you really want to see spoken about here. And we will do what we can to source those people and those perspectives for you. And in the meantime, we cannot overstate it. Please be kind to yourself. Please be kind to each other. Please give yourself and others grace. We're in one of the most hot boiling moments every 4 years. We're in it right now. And this country can get really dark in these moments, but you just in holding the door open for a stranger or trying to find a way to smile in the midst of rage, you can find a way to make your experience and others' experience a little bit lighter. So thank you again. Please feel free to also hit subscribe so that you can get notified whenever we drop a new episode on Wednesdays. And we will be back with you again next week.
Thank you.
Yay.
We did it. Oh my God.
Yay!